think that little flyer I had with the color,
No, it should still be in there.
I'm sorry?
It should be in your book. I looked at it and put it right back in there.
Madam Mayor, it's 6:07 and we're live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the special city commission meeting of Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Betty Resch.
Here.
Are you speaking into your mic?
Apparently I didn't that time.
Okay, it's sounding a little woofy.
I'm here.
Okay, well, I know you're there. Vice Mayor Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Christopher McLoy,
Here.
Commissioner Mimi May,
Present.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here. Commissioner McBoy will lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have to do another disclaimer tonight. My glasses are broken and I went to the doctor today and now my eyes are dilated. So everything's kind of soft and fuzzy. So if I don't make eye contact, or if I do make eye contact and act like I don't recognize you, it's not. I'm gonna do my best. Okay, first up. The first up is the discussion of the RFQ for the development professional services for the Lake Worth Beach Municipal Beach Complex. Who wants to present? Yeah, well,
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Before we start that, I just wanted to mention the item
thank you,
under
wait.
new business,
Mhm.
the RFQ for the tree planting. Because we've got a majority of the landscape and tree board that are not able to be here with illness and family issues and stuff like that. We wanted to push that until June, date forthcoming, when more can be represented to do that item. If that's
For the issue only.
correct,
Okay,
if that's possible.
do I have a motion?
Motion to amend as suggested.
Do I say, all in favor? Aye. Great, thank you very much. To those of the tree board that are here, I'm sure you're interested in the other things on the agenda. That's what.
I'm sorry, who made the second?
Ms. May.
Okay, can you please speak into your mics? The sound is weird tonight. Thank you.
Okay. So this has come before us before. We had some comments. I'm told that the comments were incorporated. I've reviewed it. I'm sure we all have. I have one comment about it. Do you want to present, staff present before, or you did it already? Okay. We were. What can I say that?
Assistant Finance Director, Richard. As you said, we have made the changes to the RFQ. It can work on the top, adding the photo. That's what we requested. So we can stop.
Yeah, we're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, basically, so, we went through this item, this RFQ back on the April 23rd, special meeting. Based on the comments we received that night, which weren't too substantial, we updated. We updated the RFQ, and added in the modifications that were suggested by all of you. Those are redlined and shown in the backup. And we were bringing this back to hopefully have some additional discussion and see if there was anything else that anyone wanted to hear, or any more public comment before we actually push this out on the street.
Okay, Mr. McBoy?
I don't know if it's pretty sure.
Well, we need a motion.
Yes, I move that we amend the RFQ by making two small additions to the first paragraphs on pages 1 and 4. And the clerk has kindly provided you with the text, which I'm happy to read. They would be added to the end of paragraph 1 on page 2, and the second one to the end of paragraph 1 on page 4. Would you like me to read those, so for the benefit of the public?
Well, yeah, that's the only way we find out what they are.
Okay, then we'll do that. So the paragraph 1 on page 2 is the very start of the proposal. And I would suggest adding, the city emphasizes that many years ago, the city's 19+ acres of oceanfront land were with great foresight and vision set aside as a public park for the benefit of the residents of Lake Worth. While concessions have long been allowed, and while it is beneficial for limited activities within this area to contribute favorably to the city's finances, the primary intent of this land is for public enjoyment of the natural wonders of the Atlantic Ocean. So that would be my suggestion for page 2. And somewhat similarly on page 4, where we get into the objectives of the RFQ, I would recommend adding, as introduced on page 2, the relevant 19+ acres of oceanfront land owned by the city of Lake Worth Beach hold a special place in the hearts of many residents as a park, as a window on the ocean, and as a unique location of spiritual renewal. At the same time, it is desirable that a certain amount of amenities and concessions be present, and for these to generate a degree of income to the city. A central objective of this RFQ will be seeking a sensitive and healthy balance between these two, sometimes conflicting objectives.
Yeah, we don't have in front of us, so it's really Here,
Courtesy of the Pine City Clerk,
um,
and it was emailed to Vice Mayor Malega and to the city attorney.
okay, my comment has something along these lines, about just the narrative. Technically, I think we're really questioning. But in terms of narrative, there was a, so I'm just gonna kind of expand on what you're talking about, which was along the same
Would
line.
you call for it?
Well, I'm gonna ask you first, see if we can get to on page 16, I love on page 17, you added the history, which was great, but on page 16, it still says, the opened the pool facility to the community in the early 1970s, and that's just not true. So and it's kind of, so I would just like that not to be there. Because it's, and you say on page 17, you incorporate the language of the pool and the casino and that sort of stuff, but I don't know, the pool is emphasized enough, but that sentence needs to go away because it's just not true. It was originally opened, the pool was originally opened to, yeah, I mean,
Pretty well.
yeah. I mean, it's only
Two things happening. The reference there maybe is using the word current for the existing pool facility and pool was opened in the 70s. The original pool, which was behind the existing casino and the baths, were opened in the late 19 teens.
right.
So would you like both of those mentioned? There were two pools, but people seem to forget that the original pool was filled in.
That's what behind.
We could add that.
One of the both, so people that, the message then is true, you know, we've been here before, we did it once before. Yeah, if you could add that,
I think that pool was opened in 1919, but I'm not actually possible. We'll check that.
Yeah.
We could add that statement and mention both pools and the original baths.
Right, thank you. Do I have feedback, on Chris's, suggested language?
Does that first one need to say Lake Worth Beach? Just to keep it
Everything needs to
consistent?
say.
Yeah.
Well, that's the reason good catch. You'll notice that the second one does say Lake Worth Beach, because at the time that it was done, it was Lakewood. But I'm more than happy with Lake Worth Beach.
Okay, the last, the primary intent of this land is for public enjoyment of the natural wonders of the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know what you say Atlantic Ocean because it's also the pool and the picnic and all that stuff, but I'm not gonna quibble over things. Ms. Mulligan, do you have any comments?
Not in pertaining to this right now, Madam Mayor.
On the pool in general, on the RFQ?
No, I went through it again. All my comments I made earlier, the first reading, and
And changes were made?
no, everything's good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget you, it's hard, it's easy to forget you there. Commissioner Diaz, any comments?
I'm just double checking now, and it's not seriously important, but if we're gonna talk about wording any reference to intercoastal waterway, let's call it Lake Worth Lagoon. And there's a, a very viable.
I'm curious what you, I know you make that
Right.
distinction, but he's making it in 25 words or less.
Oh, gosh, okay, well, there's, federal laws out there that don't define Lake Worth Lagoon as a northern estuary, and because it's often described as the intercoastal waterway, which the ICW is really only the channel going through the lagoon, the water body itself is of
But it's
special
a-
significance.
So, but we enjoy all of them, so I mean, technically it should be the lagoon and the intercoastal.
Yeah, you could do that, yeah.
I don't know where that is in the pages, but.
And there's consequence of, absence of that description in federal law is a reason why through things like Everglades restoration money and whatnot, like Lake Worth Lagoon often, is left out of the conversation.
Okay.
It's just a matter of putting.
Can we just add those two that, okay. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
oh. Do you have any public, do you have any cards?
Not pertaining to this
Did
item,
you
no.
get a second?
No.
Not yet, not
Okay.
yet. I just want to make sure before we start.
Just to make sure we got it all, under, Commissioner, McBoy's, the paragraph 1, page 2, all we're gonna do is add beach to Lake Worth, where that's mentioned. Page 16, we're gonna add some more information, per, your comments, Madam Mayor, on the actual dates for the pool itself, and then possibly mention the first pool, and then, Mr. Diaz, the Lake Worth Lagoon mentioned either in parentheses, intercoastal or intercoastal, and then Lake Worth Lagoon. Those are the only 3 that
Yeah.
I've gotten here, so.
Yeah.
So did you
So
get
it's-
both paragraphs?
Amendment to paragraph 1, page 4, and page 2.
Oh, yeah, there was no, change that I heard, to page 4, paragraph 1, page 4.
Right.
So,
I
yeah,
didn't hear. Although there is an extra space, but that's my fault.
But as introduced on
Legally.
page 2, the relevant, I mean, that's included, correct?
yeah, that is included,
Okay,
correct.
great, and just, let's keep it clear. Do I have a second?
Second.
On the amended motion, on the motion including the amendment.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Madam Mayor, I do have one comment.
Oh, speak up.
Yeah, so it's very short. Bridget Earl, 2215 Vernon Street. I am for option A for the beach. Option B, if we know a good restaurant that can be successful with Benny's on the beach. That's it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
do have one quick question, more informational, because this is a pretty exciting and monumental little thing, and the RFQ is really, really good. What can we, the collective we, the public, expect timing wise? Now that we did this, what's the next step? What's the timing, et cetera, et cetera?
So we can potentially post this with all the changes, I would say 19th Sunday. I would recommend we leave it out for probably about 4 to 6 weeks. And so that's going to put us to end of June. In June, so we should have proposals back sometime first week of July. And then we can start looking into evaluation process. And contract negotiations, I would say probably a couple of months by the time everything is processed. So hopefully, if everything goes well and everything is agreed upon and funds have been allocated for this, I would say that maybe beginning of September. That is,
Thank you. Yeah, so it's moving along.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, good, great. I was just handed 2 cards on this.
Yeah, those were mixed in on, in the.
Now, even though we voted, I think they should speak. So first up is Mr. Reed. This is it, it's about the pool. Don't worry, Ms. Silverblatt?
No, not on the pool.
Oh, it said item A on.
It said item A, which is the pool.
No, new business A and unfinished B. That's my bad handwriting.
New business
Oh,
A
okay.
is the,
That was the one we. pulled.
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll
okay.
that one.
thank you. Which that's what, okay, right. we got that. Okay, so next up, and this should be so brief. Okay, artificial turf. We have some cards. Well, I think the best way to do this would be to ask staff to educate us a little bit. This was brought forward an ordinance was brought forward about this last year, 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
Okay, with 2 years ago, I think. Which is, in the backup. The backup, part of the backup, ordinance.
I have one for 2020.
But 2020, whatever, I mean, I thought it was 22, but whatever. It says say 2020, but apparently it came to talk, I don't know. So this was a proposed 2020 ordinance. So, because this is such a emotional and controversial issue, I would like first to have staff give us a little background or education on it. And what staff sees as the current situation.
William Waters, Community Sustainability Director, and I have Dave McGrew, who's our city horticulturist here.
Please slow down a little bit.
The current situation is we're confused, and we don't have policy direction. And so there have been advocates for and against the use of artificial turf for quite some time. The ordinance in 2020 came out of a request of a former commissioner for staff to evaluate where it might be appropriate to utilize artificial turf, because at the time, artificial turf was not listed as an acceptable landscape material, though I will admit that in the another section of the code, it did mention it. However, when ordinances are adopted, they normally list something in conflict or in whatever the latest version of what's adopted undoes things that are in conflict with it. We do, and Ms. May and I talked about it quite a bit. We have a lot of conflicts in our code due to numerous ordinances being adopted, and we can circle back to that at a different meeting, not tonight. So this draft ordinance was put together in collaboration with a former staff member and Dave and the city attorney's office, looking at best practices, what other communities in Palm Beach County and Florida were doing. It was brought forward in November of 2020. It died a very quick death because nobody really wanted to move forward with anything of that sort. And so I believe it's been bone of contention since there was a request to enforce the ban on artificial turf like 3 years ago. And so therein lies, we have quite a number of cases kind of sitting there waiting in limbo, where some of them would meet the intents of this ordinance, some would not. And so it's back before you after quite a bit of time as to, I guess, first, is the commission open to the use of artificial turf where landscaping is required? Because that's all we have under the land development regulations. It's in the landscape code section. There are other applications of artificial turf that are not regulated by the land development code. We won't go into those tonight because that gets really involved. So that's the synopsis in a really quick view.
So when you say landscape, does that term, it's like a term of art, what is landscape? Does that include hardscapes on landscape? Permeable, impermeable, is that just?
All of that
overall?
factors into the landscape code and combines with other aspects of the land development regulation to talk about impermeable surface limits, permeability, incentives if you use like permeable pavers or pervious concrete. All those work together in chapter 23.
And it's all under landscape, okay, just.
Well, it's all in chapter 23,
Right.
whether or not landscape for the most part involves living material.
Well,
trees,
that was
shrubs,
my question.
ground code, and that's how our code is written now, and our code doesn't recognize that artificial turf is alive.
Okay, so I see lights on, I see lights on, I just want to. So the question seems to boil down to, is there an absolute, okay, so, the allotment of impervious surfaces in my yard, okay, if I have X amount of percentage impervious surface, I can use according, tell me if I'm wrong, according to the current code, I could use artificial turf where it's included in my impervious area of my yard, is that correct?
I think in most cases, yes.
So where it would be, I would have I could have a concrete walkway. I could have artificial turf. Is that, am I correct?
Or like your pool deck.
Okay. I know there's a little.
Sorry.
No, folks, there's a lot of emotions about this and there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of people taking their own interpretations of the law, whether it's agreed with by our attorney or not. So let's keep it. There has been a movement to say absolutely no artificial turf. And I know that's one of the reasons we're here now. So from the perspective of where we stand today, it can just, I don't think it can be used in impervious surfaces. Yes. Okay, so we're just really talking about pervious.
Or landscape. Well, because you could have pervious areas that aren't covered in landscape. I don't want to give absolutes because as you mentioned, there are quite a number of people who are splitting hairs and going really to the absolute core of things. So like I've mentioned at last meeting, not everything's black and white. But so where we are required to have a landscape, which usually implies it has to be permeable, you cannot use artificial turf in the place of living material.
Okay. Yes, I see your line. I'm getting there.
We normally have, you've usually been taking a motion and then you.
Well, this is a continued discussion.
Normally we've been asking.
And when we
for
have it,
first.
Mr. McBoyd, when we have an ordinance, we don't have the ordinance in terms. Right now, we have the ordinance that was proposed for use. So would someone like to make a motion on, should we pass
I
that?
would like to make a motion.
Make a motion on that.
Okay, hold on.
I mean, really, I don't see what.
We can take a motion to recommend that this ordinance go through the approval process to amend the LDRs. If you were to vote on it tonight, it would not do anything because it still hasn't gone through the gone through the right planning process to amend the LDRs, which means it has to go before the planning board, the Historic Resource Preservation Board, hopefully comment from the Tree and Landscape Board, and then come to you before with 2 readings, with one of them being advertised.
So tonight, we're not going to vote on the absolute end of this anyway. It's going to have to go through.
Now,
that
hope you're
process.
going to give us direction on what we want, what you want us to bring back, that will do whatever you want done.
Okay.
Make a motion.
I don't, on what?
I will read it to you. and you will
Well,
know.
I think we should
That's
talk,
it.
I think that this is a discussion. I think that we're gonna make it.
I move that, consistent with our city's commitment to positive environmental stewardship, our legal obligation to protect the Lake Worth Lagoon, and our commitment to proactively reduce inland flooding, we maintain our existing LDRs, which do not allow artificial turf as a landscape material.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Now we're gonna public comment on that motion, and then we're gonna have public comment on the next motion. I mean, it's getting very multi-layered. So in terms of that particular motion, I guess we'll have, I have 2 cards on this issue, not on that motion. So I would like to take a vote on that right now and then go forward on that because everybody wants to talk about. So I'd like to have that motion voted on because there's gonna be a lot of discussion with people. So, I would take, so the motion is to completely forbid artificial turf. Correct?
Is to, the motion is, we maintain, for the reasons stated, we maintain our existing LDRs, and I clarify which, if I believe I'm correct, which do not allow artificial turf as a landscape material.
Which is not really true. I mean,
Again.
is that a correct statement? I
That
don't
is
think that's
correct, because we talked about the prohibition is on the use of artificial turf in the landscape code. The applications that you were talking about are not covered in the landscape code,
Because it's impermeable.
impermeable. We do have a section that talks about substantially similar when it comes to impermeable surfaces. It can be concrete, asphalt, blah, blah, blah. And the artificial turf would be substantially similar to that, but not all of them. Some of them are very permeable. And that's where this whole nuance gets really confusing and complicated.
And it gets,
But his statement is on the basis of it is accurate.
Has there been a recommendation from our Tree and Landscape Advisory Board?
They said no artificial turf in place of landscaping.
Did they also say to clarify the language, right?
Nancy has.
I'll call on you, I'll be happy to call on you, Mr. Janice. They did have a recommendation, and it was to not allow it at all. I'm gonna call.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I'm sorry, the vice mayor's hand is up.
oh, Ms. Malega?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say a couple things. I've been doing research on this, and the town of Palm Beach County has a very good ordinance that I think that we should all take a look at. And I went through this with Director Waters. It has minimal artificial turf allowed. So there's a lot of details in their current ordinance that we could look at and review. One of them, the biggest one is artificial turf is calculated as impervious surface and shall not count towards landscape open spaces. Artificial turf installation shall be approved by either the Architectural Review Commission or the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And all artificial turf installation requires a building permit, and there's a lot more. But I'm ready to call the vote on the motion if you are.
Will you go ahead? Do it. I would have to pass the count. Ms. Malega?
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're welcome to call the question.
Yes, call the question. There was a first and a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay, we're gonna keep going. Okay, which opens up the question of how or what do we do next? There are opinions, I think a lot of us have been doing research, and I've been finding out more things about artificial turf than I had known before, about the dangers of it. I have said publicly, and to people that are interested, I would never think that we should have artificial lawns, front lawns, back lawns. What I think, and so if we've cleared up if we've cleared up, and I'm glad that we're clearing this up, but I think that this has been a source of, and I think one of the frustrations is there's been a source of inconsistency that I think people, it's my understanding, I could be wrong, that people have put down artificial turf around their pool and then been cited for it. I think that's happened. But that if in fact that's an impervious area, a pool deck would be considered, right? Then that wouldn't be a violation. That would be something that would be allowed, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, we got a little lights on. Mr. McBoy, you were first. Let's keep an eye on the clock. If we go past a half an hour,
I am timing, Madam Mayor, I apologize, but I did not hear the full vote, so did it pass 3-2 or did it fail 3-2?
it failed 3-2.
And I'm gonna go with you with a third, so it was Commissioners Boy and Diaz were yay and the others were nay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and are you counting our time, ma'am?
I am.
I figured you were. All right, so, Mr. McCoy, we have a half, so let's do some rules. We have less than a half an hour now. If somebody talks too long, other people can't talk. So let's try to keep your 3 minutes. Let's try to keep to 3 minutes.
Okay, so we can choose.
Oh, I'm sorry, wait, excuse me.
I think Commissioner Roy was about to say that we do have the ability, you guys can decide that we can do away with the half an hour time.
Yes, we all know that. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's occasionally forgotten here, but I actually am a doctor of soil science, specifically soil physics.
Hey, listen, folks, do not start commenting, waving, clapping, keep it civil, listen to us speak. We will not do, when you want to come up and speak, we will give you the same respect. This is not going to turn into that. Thank you.
And I would thank you for not counting the time that the audience interrupts.
They don't.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, the portion of soil science that I specialized in for 2 degrees, one in Florida, one elsewhere, were in soil physics, the movement of materials through soils. It is actually something where I am unequivocally a subject matter expert on. I have heard that people have said that they've done additional research. One has to be careful of what research means. Investigating things, scientific research is a little different. I have not seen any new scientific research that has indicated that all the concerns about artificial turf, plastic grass, whatever you want to call it, have any environmental benefits. And we have the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, the flagship agricultural institution in the state, making it very clear that artificial turf is not consistent with Florida-friendly yards or Florida-friendly landscape, whatever we call it. There is no ambiguity. The reason for it, somebody, I think Mr. Waters alluded to it, and a famous soil scientist, Hans Jenny, who was with the University of Berkeley, longer alive, he starts his book and started many of his lectures with "The soil is alive," which actually runs a little counter to most of my soil physics professors who tended to think of soils as glass beads. But they grudgingly do agree the soil is alive, and it's that alive portion, the organic matter portion at the top of the soil that gets built by living things growing on it. That's the part of the soil that does all of the things that help us as human beings. That's where the nutrients sit. That's what increases infiltration and reduces runoff and reduces flooding. That's what filters out things that you would rather not get into your water supply. And the problem, one of the big problems with artificial turf is it destroys organic matter. It does not build it. There's nothing alive there. And by heating it up much more than living materials do, you cook that organic matter and it disappears even faster than it normally does in Florida. So you have to always, especially in South Florida where it's hot and wet, you have to always be building organic matter if you want to have soils protect your environment. And you got to have living things on that, or could do a continuous supply of organic mulch would also work in a pinch. So, you know, I could list all the things that IFAS says. It doesn't help you out with integrated pest management. It's got finite lifespan, which means it's sooner or later going to wind up in a landfill. All the things, there just is no environmental benefit to it. And given that we already have flooding problems, we want to do as much as possible to get water to go into the soil and into the ground and not run off the soil and into our streets and drains. So that you know, we can choose to vote against the best available science, but let's be clear that that's what we're doing if we do that. Thank you.
Mr. Diaz, I think.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I mean, it was clear in the backup that I requested the addition of some of this research, and specifically the Florida statutes referencing Florida friendly landscape, and also the main paper that IFAS that Commissioner McBoy mentions describes the reason why they don't recommend synthetic turf grass. And you know, not to belabor any details, but Florida friendly landscaping, it basically has nine principles that they're seeking to abide by. And I'm sure you read this, it's in the backup, but the main thing that they are looking for is essentially protecting water, because as we know, Florida water is the #1, if not, you know, top 3 political issues, at least in state politics, and to a very large extent local, because this is where most environmental regulation happens, is at the local level. And so the main principles are protecting water, it's providing that biodiversity that Commissioner McBoy mentioned. And the reason why is because when it comes to things that we are concerned about in our water, in our aquifer, in our water sources, and in the environment as a whole, the things like runoff pollution, like phosphorus and nitrogen are 2 big ones. Others like sulfates, and also the toxic stuff like polyethylene, the plastics. All those things are intensely regulated throughout state and federal law, and it's up to municipal governments to continue that method, if you will. And so much so that, you know, and I've included this research, it's laid out on the IFAS paper, it's there for everyone to read. There's other interesting papers, I think, that are worth looking into and considering, because the main arguments against artificial turf and why that conversation of treat it as if it was a sheet of concrete, because it's not a permeable surface. And, you know, there's papers like the one that is there's one in the backup that explains, you know, when you compare it, and this paper was only comparing it to a natural turf grass, but they explain that synthetic turf grass, it might as well be a sheet of concrete or a sheet of plastic, because what it does is it diverts the water into the stormwater management drain and instead of what we want it to do, which is permeate through that healthy soil, through soil that has good bacteria that's gonna eat up the nutrient pollution and prevent it from going throughout the rest of the environment. The other paper is probably the top issue that you often hear about, and that's the concern about the heat island effect. And when you have what is effectively a sheet of plastic, and you can do a non-contact thermometer, and you compare something like a mulch pile to green cover to even real turf grass to synthetic grass, and you'll see that the highest temperature that's being reflected back into the atmosphere comes from synthetic turf grass. So that's a really important, probably the top thing that most people comment about in terms of protecting environment. There's another paper, that paper also talks about the health impact of that to, you know, to people as well. There's another paper that talks about the health impacts and the toxicity of artificial turf. And that one is kind of interesting because basically what it points out is that we know that there are many pollutants that are associated with these projects. And although most of the studies that look at the impact to human health, they're considering the granular rubber material that used to be used more. It used to be more popular, I believe, but still used in a lot of cases. The crumb rubber, that's where a lot of the focus of the public health impact studies have been, but they know that there's other really potentially harmful chemicals, things like, you know, the PAHs or hydrocarbons, PFAS, phthalates, others, you know, other things that are normally regulated as a pollutant in other areas of law. It says the question is out there and further research is needed. And basically we pretty much all but know that there's going to be an impact. We just need to better understand what that impact is. And then the last one, the paper that I included does talk about the rubber granules and why it's toxic to people. And I believe that's the paper that also points out how synthetic turf grass, it tends to be disproportionately more toxic to young children and pets because they're closer to the ground. When it's in a playground, they're more exposed to a lot of these carcinogens, and they're finding that that's the population that tends to be most directly impacted. And all this is, you know, it's really important to realize why Florida-friendly landscaping is even considered and mentioned by the state. And this is a state, Tallahassee, that historically, you know, let's be honest, maybe not the friendliest to environment. There's a lot of criticism on even IFAS itself, and that they're not doing enough to protect the environment. But this issue is so important to Tallahassee that it is meant that Florida-friendly landscaping is mentioned a lot of times throughout state statute. And I included some of the important ones. And the first one, let me take a sip.
All right, you're running a little long.
Almost done. I mean, you know, the whole point of having this meeting was
Yeah.
more opportunity to comment, right? So, you know, we should definitely honor that and have the conversation. And so the state statute, the first one that I included was the statute that mentions Florida-friendly landscaping. It's so important. And, you know, as you know, the state can't tell us what to do in many regards, even though they like to try to. But they do have a statute that says our landscape ordinances, our planning shall consider Florida-friendly landscape as best as possible. And in the instances where they can tell people what to do, which I thought was really interesting and something to be considered, is they require all water management districts throughout the state, which is, if you're not, you know, if you're unfamiliar, South Florida Water Management District is our local district that we call for short. It seems like most of the employees actually happen to live in Lake Worth Beach, which I always find interesting because they're based down the road. But every water management district in Florida is required to abide by Florida-friendly landscape on all of their district-owned properties, which is really significant when you factor in just how much property they own throughout the state, all of the water management districts, especially South Florida Water Management District. The last statute, which I think is warranted further conversation, is where they require the districts to, and this was when they first applied this law back in 2009, that all of their properties need to be phasing into Florida-friendly landscaping within 5 years from 2009 when that was enacted. And I think, you know, I hear the arguments and the science is there. Florida-friendly landscaping is well laid out by the state, by IFAS, by Tallahassee. It's clearly a very important thing, and I think historically, Lake Worth Beach has been known as a environmentally friendly community, and we have had some really good environmental regulation, although I tend to agree there does need to be clarification. So if I were to make a new motion, it would be to just take in the recommendations of the advisory board, which, you know, a couple of nights ago at our previous meeting, the three of you did mention that we should listen to advisory boards, and I think that's probably good advice in this regard. And so, you know, between the science, between the public health impact, between the environmental impact, and the recommendation of our advisory board, it seems like maintaining a prohibition and actually better clarifying the language to prohibit artificial synthetic turf would be the way to go. Because, you know, I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Madam, Ms. May? Ms. May?
I heard it, thank you.
No, I didn't get on
Oh, okay, I would love to hear from the citizens, if that could happen before I make any comments. This is a meeting because we didn't allow citizens to talk about this for years. And more than listen, I love, but it's not a surprise what you guys are saying. And I appreciate your science and I appreciate that, and I believe you 100%. But we're here to do what the majority of the citizens want, and we're also here to listen. So I would like to do that before I speak my mind. I do have plenty to say, but I would like to hear that first.
I hear what you're saying, and that is one of the reasons that this is a special meeting, not another work. Thank you. Ms. Malega? Ms. Malega?
Thank you. I just want to ask William Waters, Director Waters, I'm sorry, does the Florida Friendly Landscaping, from what I found, does not use the words prohibits artificial turf? Am I incorrect?
Maybe to your surprise, I'm not an expert on everything, so I'm gonna have to defer to Dave if he's aware of that, because I am not, I'm not in a position to answer yes or no on that question.
Okay, everything I've read has not had any prohibitions against artificial turf. If anyone can enlighten me, if I'm wrong. Because, you know, Google's not everything.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, so I actually have to tend, we all have thoughts, we all have plenty of comments. What did you want?
No, Dave has a comment.
Dave, would you like to comment?
Yes, to my knowledge, they do not specifically prohibit artificial turf. They said it should be used sparingly, is I believe the words that they use.
Thank
Actually, I
Mr.
mean,
Dan?
yeah, if you look at the IFAS website right now, which I am too, under the frequently asked questions, they don't expressly prohibit it, but they do say synthetic turf surfaces have significantly higher surface temperatures than natural turf grasses, thereby destroying beneficial microbes in the soil. Artificial turf can contribute to the heat island effect, and it does not provide habitat for wildlife and beneficial insects. And because of that, the Florida Friendly Landscaping trademark program does not consider artificial turf to be a Florida friendly product.
Thanks. And you know, the one thing that I keep thinking, as we listen to everyone, then we're gonna, I agree that we should hear everyone before the motion is made, just because this is a discussion. No one, I don't think, maybe a couple of people in the audience, but I don't think anyone is proposing that the city should allow a lawn of plastic. I think what people are asking for is, so we're talking about very global water and flooding and all that, but I think that the majority of what I've heard, the feedback that I've heard from folks is like, I'd like to have a place where I could have a dog run. I'd like to have a, so what my thought was if we could come up, and I'm not saying, I'm not suggesting this is a motion, but some limited use, some small percentage of the impervious ability to do it. The other alternative for folks would be to say, okay, I have this much impervious space in my yard. I need, if I want as artificial turf, I just have to incorporate that into my impervious area. And that's one way to look at it. So, and I think there has been a big perception that it is forbidden. And I think a lot of people are upset about the fact that, and there's people differ about the interpretation of exclusionary and inclusionary. We're not going to get into legal argument here, but the city has interpreted it one way. So can we hear from the public? Anybody have any questions, any problems with that? Okay, let's do it. And it's keeps us going to the. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna call up one by one. I'll call your name and then I'll do a on deck. I want, please respect, no comments, no laughter, no hissing, no booing, but just actively listen. Just quietly listen. And if you want to speak, you'll have your chance. Joe Canella Marcus. Hi. Name and address and 3 minutes. 3 minutes. That was good. 3. What? 3.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, let's make sure you got a mic.
Testing.
Good job.
Hi, Jake Canella Marcus, 1224 16th Avenue North. For me, I believe that this is a reason of concern because there are some major cons to this. For the most part, I consider and pride myself on the city being very green friendly, being like a place where we have trees, we have beautiful native plants and mini gardens. So to have a thing like artificial turf could be problematic. It doesn't very much encourage biodiversity. It can cause a lot of health issues, which can be a concern. I know that it's like a petroleum-based product, which means like a lot of it can lead to asthma and delayed development in children. It's not very eco-friendly. It could trap a lot of bacteria, and things that are harmful for the ecosystem around us, right? So for many different reasons, I feel like there are more cons to this than there are benefits. So I encourage you as a neighbor and lifelong resident here to, limit the use of this, restrict it, and I'm not a fan of it. Thank you.
Susan Gaio, and up next after that is Kelly Skilliston.
Hi, Susan Guio, 131 North Gulfview. I would like everyone to consider that it isn't just one yard, but it's got a cumulative effect of your yard and the yard next door. And by the way, I was just in a yard sale this weekend and the whole backyard, the whole entire backyard was artificial turf. So the cumulative effect, I think, is really the important thing. And I'd like to see it limited. I can understand somebody wanting it in the pool or something like that. But to go a whole yard like I just saw is crazy. It's inconsistent with all we're trying to do to keep the oceans cool, to have less hurricanes, to keep the coral from bleaching. All of these things, flooding, all the things that are we're really afraid of these days. This would be something that would be completely opposite of what we need to do. As we know, we create more heat, it sheds, yada, yada, yada. So I would just like you to, I support these two commissioners and what they said. And I hope the rest of you can see that way too. Thanks.
Thank you. Kelly Skilliston, followed by Jonas Reed.
I'm Kelly Skilstead, address is 1628 North Ocean Breeze. Glad I'm not following Jonas, but we do speak the same voice. Mine is different from what we just heard. I purchased my home in 2012 and with long consideration as a single parent working about 60 hours a week, I made the decision to purchase turf in a portion of my backyard for the safety of my child. Again, as Commissioner Diaz mentioned, considerate to him being closer to the ground and the carcinogens and fertilizers and pesticides used to keep the grass in good keeping. I was not a fan of that for his health. The benefits outweighed the disadvantages of synthetic landscaping option for myself. I'm also aware that there are other cities that give incentives to residents to, actually use turf. It cuts down on the water. Yes, basically that residents are given monetary incentives for installing turf in an attempt to reduce water usage, and as well, it improves the value of the home. My journey has begun back in 2014 when I called to see if I needed a permit to install the turf, and I was told no such permit is necessary. It is not banned. So I went ahead and installed it with a professional company in 2015, just to receive the violation in 2022. I met with special magistrate in August of 2022, paid my fees and fines, and I currently have a lien building on my property, but I've been a part of every online discussion of this. So I'm grateful that it's on the table again for moving forward with it, but I'm definitely in favor of using it within reason in residential areas, as I'm aware at one point it was used for commercial properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonas Reed, followed by Willie Volk.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager. I want to start with one thing. First off, since I first attended my commission meeting 2 years ago, 1325 North End Street, I apologize. Since attending my first commission meeting 2 years ago, I've been asking for this meeting. So I want to start off by thanking you all for actually listening to the citizens, inviting us to have a discussion in regards to this. As a rebuttal to the conversations in regards to IFAS, if you go to the Mounts Botanical Garden, which is an IFAS headquarters, they actually have a lovely artificial turf installation on their property. So it's kind of repetitive to say that IFAS doesn't allow artificial turf. And I can show you the photos of where they have a large lawn installed of artificial turf on the IFAS headquarters locally. With that said, when you go to buy landscape plants, you purchase them in plastic pots. When you go to irrigate your landscape, you use plastic pipes. Believe it or not, sprinkler heads are made of plastic. Most of the time when you go to do landscape, you lay down a lovely weed screening so that your landscape lands nice without weeds. That's also made out of plastic. The water that goes to your house comes through a plastic pipe. We use plastic a lot. Landscape is kind of tied to plastic. My lawn is artificial turf. I don't spray it with chemicals. It's not filled in with crumb rubber, as some people would like to claim. I have a very low usage on my water for irrigation. My property, despite what everybody wants to say, exceeds the landscaping code by a nominal portion of points based on what we have. Because just because I have a little bit of artificial turf doesn't mean I don't like trees, doesn't mean I haven't planted native vegetation for butterfly gardens, for hummingbird gardens around my property. The turf that I have installed is certified as showing as it is lead-free, it is BPA-free, it is PFAS-free. It came with a certification sheet showing the detail of its makeup, the disposal for it, and its drainage rate.
Please.
That is correct. It has a drainage rate.
They all do.
Ordinance 2020-15 is where this all started. The conversation seek to regulate artificial turf as a semi-permeable surface. Seeing as Lake Worth Beach has one of the strictest permeability codes in all of Palm Beach County and most of Southeast Florida, I think this is a logical approach to restricting its use.
Thank you, that's time.
Thank you. Willie Volk,
I'm watching it.
followed by David Sims.
Good evening. In 2014, I installed 350 square feet of artificial turf in my backyard.
I'm sorry, name and address for the record.
Sorry, thank you. Willie Volk, 216 North K Street.
Thank you.
The turf is permeable. Water does drain into the soil below it. The turf is stapled to the ground, helping prevent the soil beneath it from washing away. Notably, over the last decade, drought.gov reports that Palm Beach County has ranged from abnormally dry to severe drought more often than it has been normal. During that time, I've not wasted a single drop of water to maintain a lawn, and of course, I have not used fertilizers, which have ultimately found their way into the water table. As for the suggestion that the city's made to replace the turf with sod, native ground covers, or mulch, I tried for 9 years to grow zoysia or bahia sod, but due to the multifamily units surrounding my home, my yard doesn't receive enough sun to support sod. It lasts for a season and then it dies. Removing the turf and installing ground cover would mean the area where we have picnics, do yoga, play outdoor games would vanish. You can't have a picnic sitting on top of ferns or junipers, and you can't do yoga on top of mulch. According to the city's landscaping rules, my yard, which is less than 3,500 square feet, requires 50 points worth of landscaping to be compliant. My property scores over 350 points. I have provided ample flora to support the bees, butterflies, birds, and other fauna that visit my property. I've also planted shade trees along the perimeter to keep the turf cool. I believe the city should allow artificial turf in limited quantities on private properties. If you choose not to allow future installations of it, I hope you will at least grandfather in those of us who can prove that we installed it a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Sims, followed by Laura Devon.
Good evening, David Sims, 715 North L Street. A couple of things. Maybe if I could respond to the previous residents that did not want to use fertilizer on their natural lawns or water it. Just a suggestion, there are Florida native grasses that you are drought tolerant and you don't have to water them or use a fertilizer. Just putting that out there. I have some concerns. Many of them have already been mentioned. I think that, insects, grasses, birds, the soil and the rain should be able to interact together. I think that's very important for the ecosystem. Another thing is microplastics. If you have people and dogs walking on artificial turf, the small pieces of plastic will break off, and eventually the rain it'll wash it down the drain and out of the ocean. And microplastics are a serious problem. Plastic doesn't break down chemically; it just breaks down physically. It breaks down into smaller particles, and small particles of plastic in the ocean, they get plankton and sea life absorb them, consume them, and it works its way up the food chain. I know as a small municipality, we don't really need to deal with like large global environmental problems, but I think we should take it seriously. And I understand that like small areas of concrete and permeable surfaces near a pool, that artificial turf wouldn't be so terrible on that, but still plastic can break off of that. So it's just a concern that I'm just making people aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Up next, Laura Devlin, to be followed by Anthony Seavers.
Laura Devlin, 727 North J Street. Madam Mayor and Commissioners, I'm speaking in opposition to the proposed ordinance allowing artificial turf in our city. The wide range of environmental impacts is well documented. The focus of my comment arises from my role as a member of the Historic Resources Preservation Board as appointed by this commission. The city's historic preservation design guidelines, which the HRPB bases its decisions on, are concerned with the quote historical, archaeological, or environmental character of the surrounding area or district, unquote. There are specific references on page 215 of the need to, quote, consider native and drought-resistant species when landscaping a historic property, unquote, and the importance of permeability when installing landscaping. Artificial turf is the antithesis of every objective of the conservation element of the city's comprehensive plan. Furthermore, in attachment A, line 125 of the packet for this meeting, it suggests that a certificate of appropriateness would need to be reviewed by the HRPB prior to the installation of any artificial turf in a historic district. This reinforces the premise that artificial turf is not compatible with the design guidelines and code of ordinances, and suggests that HRPB would have to review every application for turf in historic districts, which comprise the majority of our city. There's also a suggestion that applicants shall provide an affidavit agreeing to ensure permeability in perpetuity. Who in the city would be responsible for monitoring this? It would be an additional burden on city staff to evaluate the maintenance and environmental safety of these turfs in our residential districts. I do not see the logic of being concerned with preserving the architectural integrity of our city while capitulating on the environmental aspects of historic preservation. As a guardian of our city's historic districts, I implore the commission to consider all these implications and not bring forward an ordinance allowing artificial turf in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Anthony Segrich, followed by Thomas Lemay.
So, Anthony Segrich, 601 South Palm Way. Thank you for having us and listening to us. One of the biggest complaints that we see with residents and business owners and people looking to invest in our city is that our code is unclear, confusing, random at times, and sometimes seen as punitive to people trying to do things within our city. And I think tonight's meeting is indicative of that. Here we have gentlemen from sustainability who have on occasion said artificial turf is banned. But now, thankfully, they've clarified that in fact, artificial turf is not banned. It is allowed where it's impervious surfaces. It's allowed where it's not required by the landscape. So it's nice to finally hear that we don't have this ban on artificial turf that's been asserted. Unfortunately for the city, that opens them up to a few problems. If the city decides to adopt a ban, that's a new piece of ordinance, and it's going to open you up to takings lawsuits. So consider that in you know, when you're looking at proposing a full out ban, there's that liability for the city. Looking at whether or not artificial turf is actually allowed within our landscape code, there's a couple different things. There actually is no list in our code of allowed landscape materials. Doesn't exist. So it's unclear. Fortunately for us as citizens, since 1973, the Florida Supreme Court has upheld that municipal code is an infringement on people's property rights. And as such, it has to be clear, concise, easily understandable, and when it is not, always interpreted in favor of the property owner. In this case, the citizens who put down artificial turf. Now, I'm not saying that people are going to sue over this, but maybe they will. And it's a liability that the city should consider. Now, speaking to whether or not artificial turf is Florida friendly, I defer to the Attorney General of the state of Florida. She's looked at these laws. She was asked to write an opinion on it. And her opinion is artificial turf is permissible under the Florida Friendly Landscape Program.
Thank you, that's time.
Thank you.
Next is Thomas Lemay, followed by Gail Silverman.
Evening, Thomas Lemire, 216 Wellesley Drive. Thanks for having all of us here today. I know this is a big contention and everybody's emotional about this, but I'd like to ask, or not ask, just state that pesticides and fertilizers and lawn maintenance have negative impact on the environment and human health. So all the arguments for artificial turf and the science, does the science say anything about pesticides harming local wildlife, contaminating local water resources, fertilizers leading to nutrient runoff, which harms aquatic life and contributes to the growth of harmful algae? So I don't use any of that on my turf. I have turf around my pool. I currently also have a $14,000 fine because it was banned. They came in the backyard. This man came in my backyard, said rip it all out. And we had to wait for a decision from the commission last year that nothing ever came of. It has been said here today, and it's been said by you, Mayor, on June 9th, 2023 at the pre-agenda meeting, that this code is extremely confusing. So if this is confusing and you think it's confusing and everybody thinks it's confusing, why do I have a $14,000 fine if I'm just a constituent of the town that read the code, thought it was good, had a pool put in, had numerous inspectors look at it and say, oh, this is great. So I'm just a little confused about why I have that. My ask today is to really look at all this. I know the environment is important. Nobody wants to harm the environment. That's just ridiculous. Nobody wants to. We just want to live in basically paradise, have a good backyard. And kind of just do whatever we want. I'm not growing cocaine plants back there, you know what I'm saying? So I just got a little bit of turf by my pool and I just kind of want to be left alone and have this fee waived. So that's my ask. Can we waive the fees for $14,000 because there's nobody that can really make a decision until a decision can be made, and then we can go from there. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Up next, Gail Silverblatt, followed by Deborah Roberts. Oh, we have a show and tell. None of it has rubber back. I don't. Gail.
I think it's not fair that Gail gets to bring show and tell. I was gonna bring in permeability in that show and tell, but I thought that.
And, Ms. Malega doesn't have to, you get one. Fine. Yeah.
Sorry about it.
Oh.
Gail, please, I asked for no comments from the, audience.
Gail Silverblatt, 414 North Ocean Breeze. Gravel is not a landscape material. Plastic is not a landscape material. My comments are to prohibit artificial turf and gravel in the full front yards, which I've seen riding my bike around. This gravel came from a yard that the dump truck dumped the whole front yard with gravel. And my comments to prohibit it are the same as Commissioner Diaz and Commissioner McFoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Well within her 2 minutes. And we will worry. Deborah Roberts, followed by Brigitte Stowe.
Hello, Deborah Robert, 127 South K Street. I looked into this whole artificial turf deal. I didn't know much about it. I don't have any. I may want some, I don't know. I do know that I have a National Wildlife Federation certified yard. I always have. Every home I've ever owned does, and I take that very seriously. I am for moderate use of artificial turf, especially after doing some real research of calling around different companies and also calling pet hospitals that use artificial turf, because they said the first place I'm going to call are people that own pets, not just own pets, but do surgery on other people's pets, major surgical centers for pets. There are 3 of them that I called. All 3 have been using canine grass for years. They pulled studies of their own. The grass met their standards for saving dogs. They've had them for a long time because the permeability, the toxicity, a lot of that's changed in the past 5 years. So if you guys aren't up to the current standards of the industry, which has completely changed a long time, there's more PFAS probably in your Colombian REI clothing and your waterproof clothing going out into nature than there is in this current stuff. So you might want to take a look at that. I'm just asking the commission to recognize the fact there are numerous people that are interested in having just a little bit of artificial turf that do care about the environment. Look at the drainage studies of this stuff. It's more than grass ever had. It's permeable. Nobody's looking to kill the environment on this stuff, but I do understand we don't want a huge front yard. That's all.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Stowe, followed by Kim Stokes.
Hi, Richard Stowe, 414 North Federal Highway. Good evening. I've heard some, things I agree with. Jonas Reed spoke about like plastic, how plastic is part of our lives. It just all over the place. And I think Deborah alluded to that. Right now, there's International Negotiation Committee on Plastic Pollution. They're in the process of their 4th meeting. The city or the town, the community of Oak Bluffs, the health board, voted unanimously to ban artificial turf playing fields due to concern about community drinking water. From my understanding, some of our water is groundwater. So adding artificial turf to the mix of plastics is not a step in the right direction. And one of the people who are involved in this committee is Dr. Leo Tresende. And he points out that there's like endocrine disrupting carcinogenic chemicals. And these interfere with, our human health. And it can come out in terms of like testicular, breast, cardiovascular, infertility. I'd like to see Lake Worth as a leader, not a loser. So I see the list that the staff provided for all the cities that allow artificial turf. I'm going like.
Thank you, that's time.
Thank you, Mr. Stowe. Up next is Kim Stokes. Followed by Greg Ricky.
Hello, Kim Stokes, 1321 North L Street. I agree with a lot of what I've heard tonight. I've been proud resident of Lake Worth Beach, especially because we are leaders when it comes to tackling the climate catastrophe and protecting, prioritizing our environment and health above other seemingly minor aesthetic issues. So the heat island effect is real. The damage to the soil health is real. There are forever chemicals. These things have come a long way. Yes, I agree that plastic grass isn't as bad as it used to be. We don't have to use a crumb rubber anymore, but we're also seeing states throughout the country take a new approach because they're also getting new information about the health effects. So even though artificial turf is trying to address these concerns, it's not keeping up with what we're hearing. In California, they used to see it as a potential favorable use because of their drought conditions. And the governor recently just started to allow cities to ban it. He didn't do an outright ban because he didn't have the money and everything to do the enforcement piece. So he handed that to the cities and said, we don't think that the benefits outweigh the harmful effects when it comes to things like drought and fertilizer and this typical talking points when we try to flip it around and make it seem like it's environmentally friendly when it's not. So I don't see why Lake Worth would allow something that hasn't been allowed, because as we keep learning more and more about the increasingly negative effects, then you're going to have to come back and change it. In Boston, they're not allowing it anymore because they're seeing the health effects of the children playing on those fields. So we're seeing people go in the positive direction and saying this is not a desirable use in our towns. And I don't know why we would go backwards. So I'm a little frustrated that you guys called a vote earlier without taking public comment. I'll have to check the backup, but when I was reading it at home, there was, I think, a proposed motion from staff saying, do you guys want to continue with this prohibition or not? That was explicitly in there. I don't know if it still is now. That is kind of what I interpreted the Dr. McVoy's motion to be. So I think it's kind of hypocritical that we're all here because during a workshop where we decided not to change the rules, we didn't allow public comment, and then you all took a vote before allowing public comment.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Richter. Followed by Peggy Fisher.
Good evening, Greg Richter, 1202 South Palm Way. First of all, I want to thank you all for having this meeting tonight, because a year ago when we got here, you did not allow public comment. You had one meeting here, and then you had a workshop on video, and one commissioner, no longer sitting on here, her comment was, I just don't want to talk about it anymore. And then it was voted 3-2 not to have any more conversation on this. That's wrong. Let's hear from the citizens here. I don't want it, but I think there are places for it, and especially in the backyard where it is out of sight, it's not seen by the public right away. I think there's places where we could have it. A lot of what I've heard here, the little plastic balls, all the fields where they're banning it, that's not the turf that's going in backyards now. It's permeable now. You can, the water moves through it. There's no chemical. There's a lot of there's a lot of against. I hear it. I think on a limited basis in the backyard, it's okay. But more importantly, I appreciate that this commission is allowing the public to finally have input. And one final thing, as one gentleman alluded to earlier, we really, really mistreated these people that did try to follow the rules and then put it in, and they're now, and I certainly hope that you all make a motion that these fines get removed, regardless of what the outcome is. Because that's wrong, and you're gonna get us, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. And then up after Ms. Fisher is Jeff Alder. Alder?
Peggy Fisher, 8th Street, Lake Worth Beach. I also appreciate you having this opportunity for the public to speak. What people do in their backyards, if there's no other activity going on around their house for code to be involved or the building department for a building permit to be involved, should be for the homeowner to decide. We don't live in an HOA that's 7 square miles. So I think it should have some limited uses. I feel for the Bohemian and Oceana, both who were forced by the city to remove artificial turf between concrete pavers that, according to everything I've heard tonight, would have been acceptable. I'd like to ask, for the 19 acres at the beach complex, how much of it is covered by asphalt, which definitely heats up with the sun, has no benefit, is not permeable. And it's park, as we've been told numerous times. So we aren't even doing what we want to sit up, or some people want to sit up here and lecture people about, because we've got a huge complex up there that is pretty much vacant. A lot of people that want to enjoy the beach, according to you. I agree with Mr. Richter. These fines that have been laid on people should be taken away. There's nothing that the city should have done to do this, and the commission should have done their job of listening to the residents that you were elected to represent, and that means all the residents, not those that follow your policy, not those that agree with what you say, but your job is to listen and not lecture us, not tell us what we should be doing. We don't live in an HOA. You stay out of people's backyards unless there is a valid reason. I mean, there was one commissioner sitting up here who has a concrete backyard with a pool.
Thank you, that's time.
Thank you. Aylin, Jeff?
Hello, I'm Jeff Ayla with Forever Lawn Palm Beach.
Of what? I'm so used.
I'm Jeff Ayla with Forever Lawn Palm Beach.
What are your address?
1015 West Broome Street,
In,
Lancaster.
thank you.
Yes, I'm here today just to answer any questions you guys might have. I'm a 30-year South Florida landscape designer and turf specialist. I just wanted to go over a few things that I heard that I want to quote the facts on it. I've worked with Wellington, the Village of Royal Palm Beach, Delray, helped them set their standards on artificial turf, so I'm very aware. When you start talking PFAS, do you realize that there's over 800 parts per million in your toothbrush? My turf, I can only speak for my turf, has 100 parts per million for turf. All right, so let's get that out of the way. It's very eco-friendly. It reduces chemical runoff from fertilizer and chemicals. It takes 55 gallons of water a year per square foot to maintain Augustine or Bermuda. Any carpet grass in Florida, because we're in sand. Artificial turf is going to increase the use of the yard. I'm an end user, I can tell you this. I never thought when I put it down it would. 300 times more I can use that yard without damaging it. I do all of the event lawns for Disney. They use it 24/7. All of our services exceed ADA compliance. It reduces emissions because we don't have any mower. It's a resilient surface. Crumb rubber, real quick. We have all kinds of infill. April 15, 2024, the EDA did the largest study on crumb rubber, which is backed up by over 100 independent studies, which showed there is little or no risk. EDA studied both natural and synthetic fields and found no difference between players, regardless of the type of field and materials they used. If anyone would like the press release, I got it. I'll send it over to you. I just partnered with Stephen Law. The EDA, sorry.
And who's EDA?
I'm sorry, the ADA, I got it written down at home.
And who's that?
I would have to look, but we just got all the releases for them. And when you were talking about, it being a sheet, this is a knitted flow through vacuum. This flows 800 gallons an hour.
Thank you, that's time.
So there is an alternative.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, I'm sure that was the end of cards as far, oh, I don't see it if I don't have it. Come on, anybody else? Thank you. Carla Blockson.
Blockson, 1802 Pierce Drive. I didn't check a box for or against artificial turf. What I would check a box for is the city commission making a decision. And going back to deal with the people who had fines against their property because they did what they thought best at the time when they dealt with the city and they believed what the city said. So if you are going to make a rule, make a rule. Stick with it. Let the people know when they come and say, can I get artificial turf? This is the only rule. It's not a conflicting part between this and that. It's the rule. And the people who have fines, we should take their fines away. And the reason we should take it away is because you didn't do anything when they put it in. You didn't tell them no. They came to you. You didn't say no. And if you said no, then you needed to say, if you do this, then I'm going to fine you right now. Then they would know they're going into the process by making the informed decision. And that's all we want. We want people to have an opportunity to make a decision for themselves. I don't agree or disagree. There is a lot of pros and cons, and I did listen to Mr. Diaz and Mr. McBoy regarding how they felt about it. They made a lot of good points. But at the end of the day, a lot of us move.
This box, would you address the commission, please?
I'm sorry. A lot of people move to Lake Worth because Lake Worth is tolerant. They move to Lake Worth because it's a friendly city. So let's be friendly and be clear. So that anytime a person makes a decision, they know the outcome and they make it with the consequences and they're willing to face them. That's all I ask.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I'm sure you have a few.
Yeah, I have about 11. Sam Smith, 109 North Palmway. I am pleased that the city is finally having a meeting regarding the use of AstroTurf in the city. I'm in favor of AstroTurf. Grass does not grow well in Florida, and the use of living ground cover is inappropriate in many instances. For example, children cannot play on living ground cover. The city for decades has ignored the fact that there are many families in the city who have children who need play spaces. We need to stop letting a small group of retired folks control the narrative on this issue, as they simply do not care about children's need to run and play. In my neighborhood, there are no playgrounds or open park space. As a result, my small child either plays in our yard or, sadly, the street. Utilizing AstroTurf under our child's playground would make sense since grass does not grow in that area. AstroTurf also makes sense in public spaces like the playground at the beach. It took the city 4 years to replace the playground equipment, and instead of using AstroTurf or rubber matting, the city put in mulch, which has already started to wash away and degrade on the north side of the play area, despite the fact that it has been less than a month since installation. Additionally, mulch under a play structure renders the structure inaccessible to children or parents with mobility issues. The failure to address ADA accessibility in this location and many others, i.e. Bryant Park Playground, leaves the city open to a claim or a lawsuit. Furthermore, it is simply unfair to not provide inclusive playground areas for children and their parents. AstroTurf also cuts way down on the use of potable water for irrigation and the repeated use of chemicals to keep grass green and growing in Florida. AstroTurf should be permitted for play spaces, driveway and pool borders, and other appropriate uses. Next is Ginny Powell, 224 North Palmway. I urge you to continue the current prohibition on artificial turf. Please call it what it is, plastic grass. According to scientists at the University of Florida, while designed to imitate the look of natural turf, plastic grass does not provide the benefits of a natural system. Plastic grass has not been shown to improve or create wildlife habitat, does not improve groundwater recharge, and heats excessively in the sun, which destroys beneficial soil organisms. Your pets will hate plastic grass because it burns their paws. Take it from a friend who installed a small patch for her dogs and pulled it out a couple of months later. In spite of claims it is permeable, plastic grass generates higher stormwater runoff than natural landscapes and has been shown to leach many contaminants. This should be alarming for a city whose entire eastern boundary is bordered by the Lake Worth Lagoon. Since it is primarily plastic, it has a limited lifespan and must eventually be disposed of in a landfill, a practice that is counter to the sustainability goals of the university's Florida-friendly landscaping program. As someone who loves living plants and animals, I find the use of any plastic plant material to be absurd in a state where you can grow so many amazing plants year-round. If properly selected, residents can install many visually appealing landscape plants that require minimal care and maintenance, including less water and pesticides. I strongly recommend that the city continue the ban on plastic grass and work with the county and local nurseries to assist homeowners with a selection of living plants that are beneficial to the environment, require minimal maintenance, and are aesthetically pleasing. Next is Giovanna Dominguez Timor, 301 8th Avenue North. During my tenure on the tree board, we were tasked with conducting independent research on this material and to bring it all together for discussion and a vote. Members brought all findings and we voted to ban this substance within the city. Instead of praise for our decision on behalf of life and the health of our planet and all its creatures, we endured a scurrilous assault by a few members of the community who testified that the tree board members were secretly conducting drone surveillance on their properties. Facts cannot be disputed that plastic grass brings only harm to all that lives. It is, after all, a synthetic thing that neither nourishes the soil nor delivers an underground system of roots and mycelium that communicates and shares nutrients underground to keep the soil healthy and able to process the organic and inorganic elements it receives. It is unable to boost the immune response as well as other physiological and psychological benefits we humans receive from direct contact with the earth. The same benefits received by all living creatures who thrive, eat, and die upon it in order to keep the cycle of living soil and turf moving forward and uninterrupted. The science is clear, but as it has been since humans learned to profit from the damage only we inflict upon our planet, we've ignored our moral compass and have been immunized against thinking in behalf of our planet and all life upon it after we are dead. Disturbing to learn that anyone would flounder on making the right decision for generations of plants, animals, and people yet to be born in order to satisfy the selfish desires of people who think only about themselves and their similars. I just returned from the funeral of a friend who lived an exemplary life, but was taken in 3 weeks by cancer, a disease that we have largely unleashed on ourselves by the wanton manipulation. Okay, the next comment is by Diane Brown, 905 North Lakeside Drive. Please continue to prohibit artificial turf or plastic grass. Plastic grass is not Florida-friendly landscape. It does not provide a wildlife habitat. It does not filter groundwater, and the ground under it is void of life. Plastic grass generates more stormwater runoff as the soil below it is compacted, so little water is absorbed. It still uses water to wash it and keep it clean. Plastic grass has limited lifespan, and although the manufacturers claim it is recyclable, the multi-layers make this very hard. It will be just more plastic filling our landfills. It has dangerous chemicals and forever chemicals that never go away. Just another plastic invading our environment, making more microplastic to enter our environment and our bodies. Please continue to prohibit artificial grass. Be part of the solution, not adding to problems of damage to our environment. Brittany Merriweather, 219 North L Street. My comment is regarding the use of artificial turf for landscaping. I firmly believe it should remain prohibited and the prohibition should actually be enforced. I'm honestly quite shocked that this is even up for consideration, given the leachate of microplastics and other compounds into runoff water. Any 2-second search about the environmental impacts of artificial turf on Google Scholar yields countless recent studies discussing the organic contaminants and heavy metals that pose a risk to the environment and human health. Also, artificial turf gets quite hot in the sun, increasing the overall heat index of urban areas. Real turf natural plant formations, on the other hand, provide many positive environmental impacts, such as the maintenance of living ecosystems, absorbing water and reducing runoff, purifying water from sediments and pollutants, controlling erosion with their natural root structures, improving overall soil quality, reducing fire hazards, and so much more. I understand that real grass can be hard to maintain in Florida and that people want these flat areas for aesthetic purposes and recreation. However, there are other natural plant options other than grass that can be considered. I genuinely feel that it is our duty to put the environment first, not our personal preferences. Our generation must start making decisions that are not selfish when it comes to environmental impacts. Making our lives easier should not come at the cost of the environment. Next is Sasha Orenstein, 219 North L Street. Are we really thinking of allowing residents to pave Paradise and put up a plastic lot? For what? For convenience? For aesthetics? This is absurd. Artificial turf should be prohibited. It is decidedly bad for the environment and on many fronts. Please do the right thing for our city and continue the ban on plastic landscaping. Bear with me while I take a sip of water. Next is Kristen Reed, 1325 North N Street. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, staff, and residents. I support limited use of artificial turf. To clarify, I am not asking to cover my yard with artificial turf. Most of my yard is Spanish needle and firebush. My turf was not installed with rubber tires. I'm simply asking to use this material for a small pesticide-free play area for my 5-year-old with severe allergies to local insects and weeds. After much research, I see there is no ban on artificial turf. IFAS and Florida-friendly landscaping sources use terms like limited use, which is all I'm asking for. They do not say you can never use this material under any circumstance. Even Mounts Botanical Garden, supported by IFAS and run by master gardeners, has artificial turf on its grounds. And despite the recommended ban from the tree board, I can't find where this was accepted into the landscape code as an actual rule. If the argument is artificial turf isn't Florida-friendly landscaping, then does that mean we can only plant Florida-friendly plants and must adhere to all their landscaping guidelines? Because according to their manual, weedy and overgrown yards are not Florida-friendly. Yet the city removed the verbiage banning weedy lawns in the last iteration. Additionally, non-native invasive plants aren't Florida-friendly, yet you see them throughout our city. The list goes on. My point is, banning only artificial turf is biased, hypocritical, and unfair unless it's accompanied by a complete overhaul of our landscape code to follow every Florida-friendly guideline. Please allow for the limited use of artificial turf in Lake Worth Beach. Erica Geddig, P.O. Box 1068. In regards to artificial turf, I think it's vital that the city refuse to allow it because of the negative environmental efforts. And the last comment I have is from Susily Lopez, 907 Wright Drive. I'm writing to the commission today to show my support for artificial turf and ask you to approve its limited usage in Lake Worth Beach. Artificial turf provides an ADA compliant pesticide-free ground cover suitable for child play areas around swimming pools and in places where plants refuse to grow. That's the end of the comments, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, you have 9 minutes and 22 seconds left
Okay,
of your discussion.
thank you. Mr. McBoy?
Yeah, just a couple of things. It's frequently mentioned how pervious artificial grass is. And I could well imagine, this one doesn't look very pervious, but I imagine that there are kinds that I could hold this up and pour water through it and conclude that it's pervious. That is not the point. The point is what it does in terms of runoff and infiltration, the balance of those two in actual use. The studies that are part of the backup of this tells you that this stuff doubles your runoff. So and it's the same problem. I was involved years ago talking with Dutch soil scientists about permeable pavers that people thought, well, this might be useful. They start out permeable, and when you put them in practice, they don't hold that permeability. So these are concerns. So the comment from IFAS that this stuff is not good in terms of increasing runoff, decreasing infiltration, unambiguously scientifically backed up. The frequent thing that we hear, oh, well, you know, if I don't grow real live turf, I won't need to use fertilizers and pesticides and water and all those terrible things. There are plenty of alternatives that people have been doing for a long time here in South Florida that work just fine without all of this. So there are alternatives. It's not St. Augustine grass or artificial turf. That's a false dichotomy that is being presented. So don't be fooled by that. The heat effects, unambiguous. Studies have measured it. It gets much hotter, and it does get hotter than mulch or pavement. Probably gets hotter than asphalt too, but that one I don't have the data, so I could be convinced either way. Microplastics, regardless of whether there are some of the limited amount, whether it's heavy metals or PFAS, the forever chemicals, some of the other things, whether that's been improved out, it is still plastic. And plastic, especially in the Florida environment, just breaks down into little pieces. And those little pieces with that runoff wash off, and they wind up in the lagoon. And everybody who pays any attention to aquatic environmental issues is very aware that microplastics is a very big concern to people, because they're starting to see this stuff go all the way up the food chain, including in the stuff that we eat, and not good. So there's a lot of and it was referred to that some of the commissioners have feelings about this. People, facts, research are very different than feelings. Feelings is whether I like something or I don't.
Madam
Scientists aren't interested in feelings.
Madam Mayor, I would like, Madam Mayor,
Yeah,
I would like to call point of order. I don't think the Commissioner May has had a bite at the apple yet, and we're down to 7 minutes.
what about the 30-minute thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we want,
I yield the floor.
thank you. Are we gonna go past 30 minutes? Are we gonna move to?
Yeah, mine as well. I mean, I would encourage this conversation. We're here. That's the reason why we had it. So I would move for another 30 minutes. I doubt we'll need that much, and that's it.
Okay, now again, I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
And again, they're looking for direction, not a complete ordinance. Who was next? Mr. Diaz.
I think I was next, but
Mr.
Vice
Diaz.
Mayor Malega, you've had your hand up, and I don't know if you were before me or not, so I would.
I don't know either because I can't see from here, but I do know that Commissioner May has not had a top, she hasn't had a chance.
We, her lights on, we're taking care of everybody. You haven't spoken either.
I
Um,
know, but
so- we're fine. Would you like to speak, Ms. Morgan?
I was gonna make a motion that we have staff bring us back an ordinance that allows artificial turf to be installed in rear yards only, not in historical zones, in historical areas, with direction on installation and quantity. That was my motion.
When you say quantity, do you mean area?
Yes, square footage.
Is there a second? But right now that dies for lack of a second, doesn't mean that just, it means we just keep talking. Yeah, Ms. Payne. Yes. So,
Okay, well, all right, here's my thinking about this whole thing. I hear some hypocrisy. I hear hypocrisy, where people are saying we wanna give freedom of choice to people. To do what they want with their bodies, to do what they want with their healthcare, to do what they want with the education of their children. We want to give freedom of choice, but not with their property.
And that's where it's not a matter of the science, honestly, for me, because what the problem for me is that it's not, I don't feel that it's the city's place to tell people what they can and cannot do with their property. Just like I don't think it's a government's place to tell me what I can do with my body. I know the two are not the same, but they kind of are in the fact that this, in my mind, this is a personal choice. And it's based on someone's budget, their personal opinions on aesthetics, their willingness to do the research, and their property owner's rights. Now, I agree that there should be permitting. I agree there should be inspections. I agree there should definitely be minimum standards so people don't consider a green rug as AstroTurf. But I don't agree with telling us someone how much and where it should go, because first of all, we can't even decide which side someone's front lawn. Someone might not have a back lawn because their house is set back. And that just bothers me to tell them where and when. I kind of trust the citizens to make their own decisions. You know, if I honestly, after listening to the science, I don't know that I would put it in my lawn, but so what? That's my decision. You know what I'm saying? Like, I trust the citizens to do their own research, to ask for professional opinions and make their own informed decision. So I don't know. I mean, and I think if we allow that, it's like the ADUs that we did on Tuesday. If you want one, get one. If you don't. It's the same thing with that. If you want turf, get turf. If you don't. I just don't think it's our job to tell people what to put in their backyards. So it's not a matter, I mean, you can read studies till the cows come home. That's not really what I'm being persuaded on either side about. I just think that at this point, we need to trust citizens to be able to make their own educated decisions. So I agree with, the reason I didn't second Vice Mayor Maliga's motion is because I still think hers is too, strict. So I would like the staff to come back with some, common sense, practical, very similar to the 2020 ordinance, and come back with something for us that allows artificial turf by choice. We're not going to force anyone to get it. We're not making, you know, I mean, and like the argument about the making the woodland creatures, like you're not trying to start a woodland farm in a little patch of your lawn. You know, we're not saying make a forest. This is just a personal choice on your personal lawn. I mean, I don't know. I don't like the idea of the overreach. And that's where I am on this. So, I don't know. I think we should have staff come back with something for us to actually play with, dissect, tear apart, vote on, and go and move forward with. And I do highly agree with anything that anybody who's been financially penalized for this really should. I was listening to the magistrate this morning. He had an $8,000 bill and they got off with $200. Well, we should be considering this as well when it comes to the people that have been charged for the government's ineptitude and delay of making a decision. So that's my opinion.
And that would be a reduction in fines, and that's standard.
Okay. Well, we should-
I'm just saying that's. Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, my comments are changing after that, but agree to the reduction of fines, that's a standard practice, and I feel for the homeowners that have installed this stuff because a contractor told you that it was allowable, and I agree with staff, and I agree with Mr. Segrich in saying the code needs improvement, and it's not just in landscaping, and there is improvement in code that's needed everywhere in terms of our growth management. That's been a discussion we've had up here on a number of issues, and that needs to be addressed for sure. I think we disagree, obviously, on the end goal of what that means. But I am very much always pushing in terms of all code enforcement, not just this issue. I think we've talked about it previously. You know, the heinous of the heinous, the liens and whatnot, that really should be reserved for the worst offenses, right? And for others, where there's ambiguity in code, where there's a disagreement, where there is a better alternative, I think there's opportunities to reach an amicable solution, right? I hear a really big complaint about why residents feel the need that they need artificial turf is because they have shade in their yard, and they're struggling to grow things, and the code is limiting on what they can put in those areas. And I agree with that assessment as well. I have the opposite problem. The place I'm renting out now has like no shade. And I wish it was the opposite, but I do think there's room in the landscape code to improve the alternatives in situations like that. If you can't grow things underneath the shade of the tree, there are other very reasonable alternatives that doesn't involve laying down more plastic. And I think we as a city should be working and helping our residents to achieve those goals. And that's, one of the main purposes of the Tree and Landscape Board. I know they've worked on guidelines and things and helpful resources. That's a start. I mean, we have an amazing arborist and landscape expert in Dave McGrew. There's only one of him, dude, so don't everybody call him at once. He's a busy man. But we do have resources and people that can help. So an amicable solution is certainly ideal. In terms of the regulating, there's a lot of things to address. Florida-friendly landscape, yes, it doesn't outright prohibit artificial turf, and there's a reason for that. That's because IFAS is an educational facility. They are not a rulemaking body. That's why Tallahassee takes the guidance of IFAS and the papers and the resources that they put out, and they're the ones who enact it into rule for things like Blue-Green Algae Task Force, for landscape recommendations, things like that. So that's why you don't see IFAS say, no, you're prohibited, because IFAS does not have the legal or the governmental mechanism to carry out any kind of enforcement. They're just educating and advisory. Except I completely disagree with that assessment. We are the government, and we do make rules on what people do in their backyards. For example, speaking of what we allow people to do in their backyards, you'd realize we deny fence permits all the time because people can't meet setback requirements, right? They want a fence in their backyard, but we deny them because of how our rules are. Are you willing to change all of our LDRs to allow just allow every kind of allowance of every ask that people want? I would hope not, because as the government, which is what we are, our number one role is to regulate and to protect our community from things like pollution, from too much growth. Growth management is a priority. These are why we are up here. Every meeting, we are making decisions on changing rules and how can we make them better. And that's literally one of our main focuses, if not the top focus. So I agree with that assessment. You want to take it further, we don't allow people, for example, to raise chickens and birds or livestock in their backyard. Maybe we should make a movement to change that if we're gonna allow people to do whatever they want in their backyard. If you want to go even further, in many of our zoning areas, and keep in mind, Lake Worth Beach is known historically not just a very environmentally friendly town, but we're also an artist town. But you realize that in many of our zoning regions, our areas, we don't allow people inside their homes to have a ceramic kiln inside their house. That's not even their backyard. We are making rules banning things that are inside the walls of people's homes because we're the government and that's what we do, right? So unless we're willing to undo all of those regulations because private property rights and people should have carte blanche rights to do whatever they want on their property, I don't think we want to go down that route. And so when it comes to things like environmental regulation, we're supposed to look at the data, at the science, and make the best decision, not just the best decision for science, but also for staff. What's the workload going to look like? What's the enforcement going to look like? What kind of burdens are we going to require? All those things. That's precisely what we do. And it does seem, I'm going to make a motion, and I know that
I'd like a chance to, I haven't said the word yet before anybody makes a motion.
I know this is respectfully, I know this is going to fail, but I do think it's important to get it on the record. So would you be okay to take a second?
Could I please, I really haven't said a word. Everyone's had a chance
I
to
know.
speak. I've not had a
Okay.
chance.
Okay. Well, I'll bring it after then because it's really important to, I think, memorialize and get on the record the motion that I'm thinking of. And beyond that, it does seem like, quite honestly, the three of you are intent on allowing this, and I do think the three of you I know have really concerns, and I think you put it really well, Ms. May, is how, you do have concerns and there needs to be within reason and guidelines. And I think there's a number, if you were gonna force this allowance, then I think there's a lot to consider in really setting those guidance to make sure it's the best that we can do. And then I have other ideas I would like to discuss after about what we as a city should do with our own city property to lead as example. But when it comes to people's private property, if we're gonna allow it, there really should be very strict, if you will, guidelines. And I've heard the arguments, yes, Florida-friendly landscape, they say they want you to move away from chemicals. That's why, but it's not one or the other. It's not natural turf or artificial turf. They also don't want you to use natural turf because of the chemical use. They are trying to get you to move away from that. And we have people sitting in this room who I think are probably some of the best gardeners in the area, if not the state, who are experts at this stuff, quite frankly. And there are other alternatives to move us away from that. And that's the entire intention of Florida-friendly landscape. So yes, I too would not lay out a whole field of sod and spray it to death with chemicals and let my 9-month-old play on it. I also won't let him play on artificial turf for a multitude of reasons. And if we're gonna go this, private property route, then I want to continue that discussion because there are a multitude of requirements that really should be done. And I hear, I entirely respect and appreciate, there's two gentlemen here who are contractors that sell this stuff. And I too would want to learn more because I hear consistently that there are safe products, but, things about the diversion of water, like it's been mentioned, the material itself might have holes in it. You could probably spray water through it, but the concern is generally more about the compaction of the soil underneath and long-term use of having this stuff down for too long, right? Another environmentally friendly material would be like crushed shell rock. But through time, that gets compacted so hard, it might as well be concrete because the water is going to flow right off of it and not go into our aquifer. Instead, it's going to go through our stormwater management system where it goes out into the lagoon, and then we lose that very valuable fresh water to tide outgoing to the ocean instead of getting it in the aquifer where it needs to be.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. May, a couple of things you said, I have to disagree. First of all, you said earlier in the day that we have to go by the majority of the people. That's actually, I think, an inaccurate statement. We have to go by what we feel after what we've learned and discussed what is best for the city. Okay, so that, which may not be what, I mean, if everybody wants to do something that's not good for the city, then we should not do it. Okay, the other thing is true, and I agree with Mr. Diaz in terms of that is part of our job, is to tell people, to make rules. I don't see that as an imposition. That's what we have. I don't see you as an advocate. So there are rules, and we try to make people follow them. My feeling about this is apparently, obviously, to me, there are pros and cons. Mr. McBoy would say there are no pros. Mr. Diaz would probably say there are no pros. I think there are some pros. My feeling, and I have said this from the very moment I met a couple people in Publix about artificial turf, is I will never say that we should have front lawns that are artificial turf. I will never say that we should have back lawns that are artificial turf. I don't care if we can see them or not. I think there's enough in the terms of pros and cons to find a balance. Okay, and some people don't like it because I try to find balances all the time, but I think we need to do that. I think that if I had what my vision would be to allow it under. Now, I asked Mr. Waters and Mr. McGrew earlier today, in terms of artificial permeability, there's impermeable and there's permeable. Is there a middle? Is there a yes, and I would like you to answer that question.
You can both answer. Yes, there is.
Okay. And in our landscape code, we don't define what artificial turf would, where that would come. Do we or do we?
Because our landscape code doesn't
Allow
allow
it, okay.
artificial turf, it's
On
landscaping, it doesn't mention, but
Okay.
right.
Okay. And so going along with that, do we have a standard of, drainage of runoff, the pound, into the,
You mean gallons per minute?
gallons per minute, thank you.
Not exactly, thanks for the question, Sim. We have permeable requirements of the lot. There are some provisions where you can get an incentive, say if you have permeable concrete or permeable, other things that are normally hard surface, they have to performance rating, demonstrate that they meet a certain percolation rate, whereby that 2 square feet of that material counts as 1 square foot of impermeable surface. The nearest thing we have to a prohibition is something from the South Florida Water Management District. You've got to retain, I think it's a 3-hour intense rain event of some sort. I can't remember the numbers, but I can get them to you from Dawn. But we did downzone the city in 2013 and increased and ensure that much more of the properties in the city would have to be permeable surface versus impermeable surface.
Right, we're pretty
Knowing
strict
that-
about impermeable, right?
We're very strict compared to most municipalities. Because we knew that our stormwater system couldn't really grow, it could be made better. And we already had problems when I got here almost 14 years ago with runoff. And so we decided that it was better to try to keep as much water on the properties as possible and have that permeate through the soil to recharge our aquifers. So there is a performance standard that could be created for artificial turf that I don't think we can write when this is where we need the legal eagle to sort of jump in. I don't believe we can write a performance standard so draconian that nothing meets it.
Sure.
Or only one manufacturer meets it.
Right.
How open it has to be, we can work with Glenn and Elizabeth as our city attorneys and others as to what that performance standard is, but the little piece of paper that you had, we were looking at is very similar to the information that Mr. McGrew has. It has a performance standard. I think the ordinance that we had proposed, because it was originally written in 2020, and it's almost 5 years old now. There are probably areas that could be greatly improved if you were to decide to allow artificial turf in place of some landscaping.
Okay, so I am not a soil scientist, but I play one. I had to, I'm sorry.
There's not a lot of TBR.
But I'm a lawyer, and I do look at facts, and I do look at different things, and I think that, again, like I'll say, there are pros and cons to both. They have the chemicals in the grass. I mean, I have pets. I have no grass in my yard. My yard is completely. It's grass free. It's leaves. It's a forest. It's like mulch. So, but I come in sort of in the middle, which is, I agree that never should have a lawn that is, a plastic grass. I've said that for years now. But I do think that within the purview of someone's backyard, if they want to have a dog run, if you don't want your child to play on artificial turf, but somebody else does. Some child might have an allergy to, they don't have to put chemicals. They can use things other than chemicals to fertilize, but they don't, mostly. They're much more expensive. So I would like to see some sort of a compromise in terms of not of a small area. Again, how much do you need for a child's playground area? 10 by 10, 10 by 20, 15 by 15? I'm just throwing the numbers up in the air. How much do you need for a dog run? Depends on the size of the dog. Well, I would say it would be a percentage-based limit. So that's what I'm looking for, just in terms, and I don't know where we're gonna end up tonight. Is Ms. Lloyd still with us? But she's not there. Okay. So I would like to give direction that, okay, so number one, to clarify, we have fortunately clarified tonight about impermeable surfaces, that it's fine there. And we're gonna deal with the code stuff that has happened. We're not gonna do that tonight, but we need to deal with it. I would like to see a small percentage of the permeable space allowed for specifically an area, a small area of the yard. Because I do think that we do make rules, but I also don't want to get draconian in what, in, you know, how we go. So that would be, well, between pavers, if it's impermeable, it doesn't matter. That's the problem with what we did to the Bohemian and the Oceana.
So that is.
That would be okay, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, it would be okay. Unfortunately, we may just take it out, I think. So, number one, I think we've done a good thing tonight in defining the fact that it is not completely forbidden. It's okay in impermeable areas, and that's. You know, a lot of people want to interpret the code. I disagree with their interpretations, but I'm just a little. And number three, I think we should find some sort of compromise. I don't, you know, we don't buy majority rules in terms of the public, but if it's not something crazy, we should listen. And I'm glad, I mean, I was very frustrated a year or so ago when I tried to bring the area up and I was shot down and we were not going to talk about that anymore. So I'm glad that we're talking and listening to the people in the city about their views. So that's where I would come down. We are really probably getting close to 30 minutes. I mean, we've all had a lot to say. I would like to very short, you know, we need to give them some direction, but I would like short, please keep your comments, both, everybody short.
Yeah, can I just make well, I have a short comment after, but I would like to make a motion just to record the vote, because I think we should get in this habit in terms of, we have a recommendation from an advisory board, so I would move to adopt those recommendations and, you know.
Is there a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Yeah.
All opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay, nay.
Sorry, nay.
Okay, thank you.
You said opposed, right? Yes, I am.
Okay, so with that, so we recorded that, so we can move on from that recommendation. And, you know, I don't know, I guess the direction would be to discuss what these parameters would look like. You know, I would suggest if we're gonna maintain it as impermeable, that's probably the best fit, and treat it as if it was concrete because of the compaction of soil underneath and the research that proves otherwise. I think when it comes to, you know, we are talking about things like this stuff is made of polyethylene, and which, you know, we always have these water bottles.
You know that there's there's.
Yes, if I can, please, like, we know, you know, these bottles are always up here. I never drink out of it. They're just always up there.
Well, you had your monster drink the other day in a plastic.
No, I don't
bottle.
drink that stuff, are you kidding?
Well, no,
Oh,
you-
that plastic,
Yeah,
no, I
it was
use.
some kind of- it was a plastic bottle.
But in any case, if I started a 800 pile of plastic bottles, in the front lawn, that would probably result in a citation, I would assume. And, you know, the weight of, synthetic turf, it's pretty significant. I forget what it is. I think it's something like 100 square feet is about 800 pounds or something like that. There's probably different products. I'm sure Mr. Reed or some of you guys can answer that, but it's significant. It's a lot. It's a lot of weight when you're talking about, you know, big gilt lawns. So I appreciate that you're not open to having fence right. And so on the limited use, though, we do require things, when, you know, certain construction projects, I know, for example, of at least one where the person was forced to go through a soil test on their property at their own expense. And, you know, I know fence contractors, I wouldn't take everything they say for word. I think generally as a habit, when we ask an applicant to prove that a product is safe, it's under review, preferably by independent lab or just like that soil test. And so, you know, habits like that, but I think that's a future discussion. And so the other thing that I wanted to mention that's similar but related is what I talked about. If we're gonna allow this for on people's private properties, and I think we as a city really need to live by example. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include the one statute, the shorter one, which is the one that requires, the state required their water management districts to abide by Florida-friendly landscaping. And I've already discussed this with our city managers, and I know our assistant city manager at least is very on board. Jamie is, I'm softening him up, he's coming around. But I think we should come back with a policy, a very similar one that's over 5 years on our city-owned properties, that in that 5 years, we should be phasing ourselves to being completely Florida-friendly landscaping guidelines.
Thank you. May? Ms. Clerk, Madam Clerk, how are we doing for time? Madam Clerk?
We have 13 minutes and 12 seconds.
All right, and it would be fun to say in that. Okay, Ms. May?
I just, when staff comes back, you said there, I know that there are properties that already, if we go with the standards that you guys are talking about now, which is fine with me. I mean, I didn't say that it could be completely anywhere, but within the guidelines, we should also know, well, okay, well, what happens if people are not in those guidelines? Are we gonna grandfather them in? Are we gonna find them? What are we gonna do? Because I think that people need to know that. They need to know what to expect, and then is it gonna grandfather? Is it gonna keep going from day one? I mean, we should be clear.
Okay. I can answer part of that question real quickly. I don't want to take your, you can maybe stop the clock, Melissa.
Yeah, when you're talking, then it's stop the clock.
Not talk fast. We did a policy when this kind of got started, that even though in our, management system, the fines are running by day, we can't turn it off until it's been complied. And so we've triggered back to a date, a couple of years ago at this point, where the fine would technically stop until you make a decision. And then look at the cases that we have. Some will be in compliance, some will need modifications, but that whole interim period, which is now going to probably approach 3 years, will be taken off the lien. And then keep in mind that under our co-compliance reduction process, liens are capped at a certain percentage of the property value. And then anything you spend to remedy the co-compliance case can be taken off the outstanding lien, as long as you have canceled a check or a paid invoice. So a lot of the liens are going to get wiped out, because I think many of them that were cited may have been cited for a reason that is going to be, based on what I'm hearing, they would be in compliance or very close to it. And we would give them additional time without the least the fine running. I'll work with Yolanda Robinson, our assistant director for co-compliance, and Elizabeth Linehan, our city attorney, to ensure that we have an equitable approach. There are going to be cases where you're going to have to do something.
Yeah.
And we give reasonable time, just the same way we gave with the letter for a vacant registry, and what we had proposed. It was, I don't think Ms. May was on the commission at the time. We had a tentative letter in dealing with short-term rentals. Here's the implementation schedule of whatever decision you make when you have to come in compliance.
We'll be talking about that at the meeting.
Yeah, I know. Looking forward to it.
So fun. So in the next, your right is on again, Mr.
I want to thank the mayor for your comments on personal choice and property rights. I did have to say I was a little shocked to hear one of my colleagues saying that things are a personal choice. That to me is a disrecognition of what government is about. We live in a society. We live piled up on each other. And we have, for generations, said, you know what? You kind of need to have some rules for the greater good of everybody. Nobody likes the rules. I want to be able to do whatever the heck I want on my property. But I can't, because what I might want to do might affect my neighbor. And we've said, hey, let's try to, the challenge for us is to come up with rules that are fair and balanced and not too onerous, but protect the things that need being protected. There's nobody directly who can speak up for aquifers, who can speak up for future generations that have to fish chemicals out of aquifers. There's nobody who speaks up directly for the Lake Worth Lagoon, although we do have a commissioner who does a pretty good job of it. Part of our job is to make sure that things are protected that need to be protected, and that, have a homeowner that necessarily get benefits from it. But things that we do can be a problem for other things, and that's why we have some regulations. Okay, Mayor, you said that you strive for balance. I think it would be very interesting to go talk on a rainy night, as I have done, with people whose streets are flooding, not on the lagoon, but inland, and tell them that balance means you're going to vote for something that will increase that flooding. Because the science is very clear. Any amount of the stuff that you put down will increase runoff and decrease infiltration. There is no balance in that. It's just how much do you want to be difficult to some neighbors who happen to live in places that flood? So balance means saying, you know what? The balance of the minor benefits of this do not outweigh the increased damages to other people. That would be balance, but there is no way to increase the amount of something that is known to increase runoff. There's no balance. Any increase in that is going the wrong direction. So let's be clear on the facts of it, rather than saying, oh, I'd like some balance, because you can't do that.
Thank you for the lecture.
Clarification
So, all right,
is the term.
so where are we? We're like 3 minutes left. Are we gonna give the staff some recommendations, some guidance to come back?
Can I stop your clock for a few minutes? Try to help you out. If you may or may not be aware, the Inner Land Development Code, we have recognition of small lots, medium lots, and large lots. And the impermeable surface allotment percentage is greater on the small lot versus a large lot. So we're just having a sidebar that, if it is the pleasure of the board, we can, make quite a number of tweaks to whatever was done back in 2020, but also propose that the limit that you were talking about, Mayor Resch, be based on the lot type. And there will be a certain percentage that would be the limit of how much artificial turf you could have on a small lot. That percentage would be lower for a medium lot and lower for a large lot. But at the end of the day, they're probably going to end up sort of close in, let's just got a gigantic lot, how much you'd be allowed to have. And we'll try to find out if other communities do it that way. I don't know. And then what would be a reasonable sort of square footage that could deal with a dog that's average size, not my dogs, not a Great Dane.
My dogs.
And maybe the child play area that has been brought up. And maybe it could help you when you see that to narrow in on something.
Thank you. I would be interested in I don't want an answer now, but the folks that have the grass and, are speaking up because they put the artificial turf in, please contact me directly, because I'd like to know how much, for example, you have, I'm not asking you now, but how much is in your, what are we dealing with in terms of existing turf? Because we're gonna have to deal with that as well. So, I just don't believe, I think there are pros and cons despite what I'm being told. So I would like to my direction would be to have staff come back. I would also like to learn more about artificial turf. I've heard some things tonight that I think are interesting to find out. The fact that it's at Mounds is sort of interesting. So I personally want more information before I make any vote on this issue. But I'm pretty square with no lawns, no expanses of artificial turf. And I think that is pretty much, people quibble about the legality of the interpretation of the code. I think that one's pretty clear. So that's what I would come back with. And so does somebody want to make a motion quickly? Anybody want to?
I thought that was just, it's just instruction, doesn't
Well,
need
it's
to,
motion
doesn't need to
to,
be.
or I'm waiting for that. Direction, no, we need to give direction to staff.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I'm asking, either.
Yeah, so it sounds like, I don't think it's a motion, it sounds like direction, it sounds like the thing that I mentioned, Florida friendly landscape on city property, come back with the options on that, and then in terms of allowing it as impermeable, what would be needed in terms of changes to our LDRs, and what does that look like? Like, do we need to change, the ratio on small lot sizes, medium lot sizes, setback requirements?
Are we combining
All that
both
stuff.
commercial and residential? Because that's what.
That's
we're
a
doing.
good question. Well,
I thought this
Good
was
question.
residential,
What is it?
because he was talking about not commercial, but the city.
No,
It's
so-
not a residential.
oh, no, that was the thing that I mentioned for.
You also said that was a separate conversation.
That's a separate policy thing. So that would probably be its own agenda item, is bringing city properties to Florida friendly landscaping.
Yep.
And then for direction on private property, it would be. Sorry, William, this is probably gonna be a mess. It's the needed changes to LDRs for the clarification on the impermeable surface things. What does it look like in clarifying landscape code to maintain a prohibition on that, and just the various options. And
That's not as mighty.
it's not as bad as it
It's not as
sounds,
muddy
but-
as you.
Yeah.
I hear that, and we'll, I don't wanna call it doctor up, but we'll look at the best management practices, working together to see what changes that from this draft ordinance. Wrap in some percentages as what we feel is we can tolerate in terms of having, the artificial turf in the backyard where landscaping would otherwise be. And, we can sort of farm it around to you all ahead
I was
of
gonna say,
time.
if we could have one-on-ones about it, just. so
And
you
then
know.
decide if we need to have a workshop, because we have had workshops in the past before things went through the whole advisory board process.
Mhm.
And if you're generally okay with, like, I don't think it needs to be totally thrown out, I can sort of live with this, then we'll maybe move it forward. Or if you are really like, totally like, I need more information, whatever, we can schedule a workshop where you can do it as a special meeting, so you can take more information from the public.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah. And we'll try to do it by August,
Okay.
because it's May.
Yeah.
Hopefully sooner, but we're in budget.
Oh, I know, we have done, and SGUs and SGRs and ADUs and everything else.
And
It'll be a busy summer.
And then one last thing not to forget is, and this would be more from legal, the options and in terms of lessening fines and what can we actually do in that regard for.
We have lots of
I think it should be a
options.
case by case
Even
basis, too.
within,
Some of them are.
even within what we have already on the books. And we can look at that. We've been talking about that, knowing how long this has been going on.
Yeah.
That some people are doing some direction so they know what they can and can't do with what they've got.
Little jury notification.
So right now-
Madam Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
Pardon?
Right now, nobody should do anything.
I see,
Correct, because they're not, even though they're running in fine on the books in Noveline, they are, that's our software system, they're not actually generating, that these days are still, we're gonna take them off at the end of the day.
Right. Ms. Malega?
thank you. Just because Director Waters just brought this up. Being the fact that we are going into budget, I would like to have this issue resolved and ordinances codified and on the books before the fee schedule is set for the coming year. So this is part of the process that people know in black and white what our fee process is going to be for installation. And permits and et cetera.
When does the fee schedule come up?
Comes out with our budget.
Consumption.
As part of what?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The fee schedule is normally a series of resolutions that are done.
I don't think
either
that, I
at-
mean, I think that's an interesting idea. I don't know if it's realistic because we're.
I think it could be, because most of our fees are based on the value of the work.
Okay.
And the fee schedule is typically gonna be part of, the second budget workshop we have scheduled for the third week in July.
September 26th.
So perhaps Director Waters, when you bring back stuff, you can tell us what other cities are charging for the installation process and permitting and such too, as well, so we're in line.
Okay, I think we're probably gonna be less expensive already.
Would you need a permit to install artificial turf? I don't know what permit, but
Yeah, permit to install,
if it's part of.
if we move forward with it. I just want to see all the numbers and know the facts, that's all.
Mr. Brown is.
I don't wanna lead with an unrealistic expectation. All building permits and landscape permits for the most part, when something big is based on the value of work we propose. There are standard fees for the zoning review. So I don't think we're probably gonna come back and say that all installations of artificial turf are gonna be $10. If there's a really big installation that requires more inspections, it's gonna be more really based on the value of that landscape, of that turf installation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
And just to clarify, so for the fee schedule, we do have a second budget workshop, our first is next Wednesday, obviously the 15th of May. The second one's scheduled probably the third week of July. That's when we would actually discuss the fee schedule and bring the draft. Then our first and second reading are in September to actually approve the fiscal year 25 budget, which is when we would then have the final draft based on the conversation. So I was thrown off by the September date. I just want to clarify that. As far as what we're going to do with a modification of ordinance, my suggestion, if we can handle that in one-on-ones, when we get and then bring that back to a future meeting, maybe under unfinished business.
Right.
Once we've spoken with everyone, so then we bring it back in front of the public after we've kind of gotten something together. And then we can move from there. If that's okay with everyone.
The only caveat is if we have a draft ordinance in place, the process to have that go through as a LDR change would be Planning and Zoning Board, HRPB. And then, so if they were to see the ordinance, they couldn't actually vote on whether they liked it or not, because that would preempt the public hearing process.
Jonas did.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
No, you might, yeah.
All in favor? For the lip gloss.
Hold up, the lip gloss.
Well,
There.
I was never supposed to do that.